to now. It's the recent comments by Pope Francis. Catholics have been reflecting on them. The pontiff said in a documentary that he thinks same-sex couples should be allowed to have civil unions. The comments in the documentary premiered last week. They include a line from Pope Francis in which he said, same-sex couples are children of God. They have a right to a family. Nobody should be thrown out or made miserable over it. And he's called for the creation of a civil union law. Now, those comments have sparked controversy in recent days. I had a chat with Jack Valero and I asked him what exactly it was that the Pope had said.
Well, the Pope has said that we should not discriminate against homosexuals, and they should not be chucked out from their families. We should love them and accompany them, and they should be protected. And if the protection means there should be a law for civil unions or civil coexistence or something, well, that's what we should do, because they should be protected. He doesn't agree with same-sex marriage. He thinks that's an impossibility. He doesn't even agree with same-sex relationships. But he does want people to be loved and accompanied and protected. He wants people to be protected. So that's his position. When I first heard the comments, I didn't think they were controversial. I thought, yes, of course, that's what he has always said, that he wants people to be protected and loved and accompanied. And you can hold that position whilst disagreeing with gay marriage or even same-sex relationships.
These comments have come in a new documentary about his papacy called Francesco. As you mentioned there, Pope Francis has referred to same-sex civil unions before. A few years ago, he asked, "Who am I to judge?" when he was talking about same-sex unions. What kind of impact will these latest remarks have within the Catholic Church?
Well, the "who am I to judge" comment was not about same-sex unions. In fact, it was about a priest who was homosexual, and he said, if he loves God and lives a good life, who am I to judge? Which is really, again, the same thing about loving and accompanying people and protecting them, not judging them. What impact will it have on the church? I mean, the doctrine has not changed. I know there's been quite a lot of controversy, which surprised me at first, because some people think that he's changing the doctrine so that same-sex relationships are now okay, which is not the case. And others think that are happy because of that. But in fact, things will stay the same. But perhaps he has wanted to say this now to remind us that, yes, there is doctrine, but above that, there is the love we must have for each person. You know, when in the 1950s, the country was discussing the decriminalization of homosexual activity, which went through there in the 50s. The Catholic Church was in favor of decriminalization, even though it does not agree with homosexual activity, because it doesn't want people to be criminalized because of that. It wants to accompany and protect people. So it's more or less a similar thing now, you know, that we are in favor of people, even though we're not in favor of this behavior.
What kind of impact will this have on the papacy of Pope Francis? As you mentioned there are differing attitudes across the world to same-sex unions. Here in the UK, same-sex civil partnerships were introduced 15 years ago. Same-sex marriage has been on the statute books, civil same-sex marriage, for a number of years. And yet in parts of the world where the Catholic Church is very strong, same-sex unions are frowned on. Life is made very difficult for people within same-sex relationships. How will this impact the papacy of Pope Francis in those areas as he makes what is a high-profile comment asking people to show love and understanding to everybody?
Yeah, and of course, more explanations may be needed to show that the Catholic Church believes in people, even though its teaching on marriage is very clear. It has not changed, which is that sex is for marriage, and marriage is between a man and a woman to form a family, and that stays the same. But perhaps in those countries where they persecute homosexuals and put them in prison, this can help to stop that, because the church is in favor of people living their lives, being allowed to live their lives, and being protected. even though, as I say, its teaching on marriage, which is very clear, man and woman for a family, has not changed and cannot change. And what impact will it have in those countries? I don't know. But perhaps if it has an impact in protecting people, this will be a good thing.
You mentioned that Pope Francis has touched on this issue many times before, and through his time, even before he became Pope, when he was working in Buenos Aires, he was endorsing legal protection for the rights of gay couples. But it's the first time he's spoken about the matter, perhaps so clearly, as Pope. You've mentioned that you weren't surprised by the comments, but many other people were. Why do you think they've had such a big impact?
Well, yes. In fact, the 2010 Buenos Aires campaign against same-sex marriage is a good example, because the government, who had not bothered about gay people before, decided that they would push this legislation, and partly to attack the church, which they thought would be against it. And some people in the church were straight against it, which is because, we don't believe, the Catholic Church doesn't believe gay marriage is possible. But Bergoglio, the Cardinal Bergoglio, who would become Pope Francis at that time, he thought that we should, reject gay marriage, but think about the rights of gay people to live their lives and be protected, to be able to visit each other in hospital, to inherit from each other in the case of the death of one, and so on. And so he said, let's think and promote the idea that there should be some legislation on civil partnerships or something similar, but not just for gay people, but for anybody who has lived together and wants to protect that relationship. So that when we come to consider gay marriage, we can say, well, no, gay marriage is impossible. And in fact, we're already protecting people this other way. So he proposed this, or he was in favor of this. However, other Catholics, other powerful Catholics, were not in favor of this. So he lost out. And in fact, the gay marriage legislation was passed, unfortunately. And despite the fact that he had been working towards it not passing. So that's a good example of him putting forward another solution to ensure that gay marriage wouldn't pass and still protecting people. And I think that's what he's talked about now. Of course, now being Pope, he has a greater outreach. But the idea is the same, which is let's not defend our doctrine by attacking people, but let's defend our doctrine and protect people at the same time, because they're not incompatible.
That's Jack Valero. Jack Valero is the founder of Catholic Voices. He's also a member of Opus Dei, giving his opinion on the recent comments by Pope Francis in that documentary, Francesco,